All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the HVAC Insider Series brought to you by Breezy. I'm your host, as always, CJ Todd. And here at Breezy, we're dedicated to helping HVAC business owners thrive in today's competitive market. That's why we invite HVAC experts to share their proven strategies and insights, all designed to give your business the edge that it needs. Whether you're looking to boost sales, enhance your marketing, or overcome the stress of seasonality, the HVAC Insider Series has you covered. I'm joined by Breezy's founder and CEO, Sean Ritchie, from the EGIA Contractor University's Epic 2025 in Orlando. Sean, how's the event going out there?
Oh, it's awesome. Catching up with a lot of our friends in the industry, a lot of inspiring speakers. Yeah, it's good. There's just like a great energy around, people trying to find a better way of doing things. So I enjoy it.
That's awesome. How was the opening keynote? Did you get to see
Great.
it?
Great. Yeah. And we got to go to one of Weldon Long's speeches yesterday. So always inspiring stuff. While he'll make you want to run through a brick wall. So I didn't try that, but maybe I'll try that later today.
For sure. Well, put a helmet on or something, dude.
Yeah,
Protect
my
the moneymaker.
my usual helmet. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. My ski helmet.
All right, my man. You want to introduce everybody to Breezy?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey guys, I'm Sean Ritchie, co-founder and CEO of Breezy. Thanks for joining the masterclass series. We're bringing these to you a couple times a month. I think the general premise is we just want to bring interesting insights, ideally things that are topical, things we deal with in the day-to-day, to our pros out there. So keep the feedback coming. That's how we recruit a lot of great people like Rick to come join, share some of their best practices, etc. So been on Breezy. We're the fastest growing operating system for HVAC companies. We're growing 30% month over month. And we really have a two-pronged mission here. So number one is we're trying to eliminate off seasons for all of our clients. Number two is we're trying to eliminate time, energy, and resources so you can work more on your business versus in your business. So I think it's that last point that plays in well with what Rick's about to bring us. Rick is a beast. We met back in the fall at a couple events, and he's the former director of training and development at Gettle, consults with a lot of different companies in home services. And I think, in general, seems to be like a master of training, communication, and productivity. So I'm a huge, somebody said this to me a few years back: if you can't be replaced, you can't be promoted. That stuck with me because I was like, that's interesting. I think we all as business owners have a tendency to maybe grab tight onto the reins. But the reality is, if you want to free up your time and energy for other things, you got to have other people taking on things on, taking things off your plate. So love what Rick's about to share with us. I think really the only way to grow and scale your business is through people. The only way to grow and scale through people is with effective communication, delegation, things like that. So with that, I'll kick it over to CJ for Rick's full intro. But yeah, excited to kind of bring these today. And I guess you can see on the slide here, we're also running a raffle for a free billboard this month. So if you guys want to book a demo, you'll enter in the running. And I got a great marketer who can put together, the "your wife is hot" or some sort of catchy billboard for your local hometown where we can hopefully get you guys some leads. So feel free to scan that QR code. Otherwise, let's dive in. See ya.
All right. Thanks for that, Sean. Yeah, all of our wives are hot, I think.
Exactly.
Cool. So I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, Rick Gutenmann. He brings 35 years of leadership and business operations experience to today's session. Like Sean mentioned, he was at Gettle Air Conditioning and Plumbing, where he helped create and install the Gettle Academy training program, which helped that company scale operations to 12 locations. And now he brings his expertise to HVAC business owners that are looking to implement operational excellence inside their business as a senior consultant at MAP Consulting. And today, Rick's going to share those 3 leadership strategies that are going to help you thrive during the summer's high demand chaos. He's also going to give you free access to MAP's Monday morning action plan, which is designed to help you run effective alignment meetings every week, which can help keep your people focused on your shared goal during the busy season, which is maximizing profitability. So if you want to go ahead and scan that QR code now, you can access that Monday morning action plan. I'll also be dropping the link in the chat in just a second. And just so everybody knows, we're going to be recording today's session. I'm going to email that out to you later today. Please participate in the polls today. We want this to be engaging and interactive. And there's going to be a Q&A session, so hang on to the end for that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Rick Gutenmann. Take it away, Rick.
All right. Thanks, CJ. Appreciate the introduction. It was great. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with me today. Super excited about this topic. As far as timing, I know, it's hard to get on people's schedule, especially, in peak season. And so this is the time to do it, right, is to get on the schedule here in March. I'm talking to you from Las Vegas. It's actually a little chilly outside here in Vegas, but that's not going to last. It's going to get hot here pretty soon in April. Same thing in Phoenix. So if you're in those warmer weather climates, I know that you got, peak season coming up here with, the heat coming. If you're from those northern states, you're probably still dealing with a little bit of cold. So you're still in your peak season, but, you'll get a little bit of reprieve here and then you'll jump right back into summer. So, we'll be there again. And so this topic, career accelerators, it's something that when we do our workshops and we train on the various topics, these three things that we're going to talk about today, communication, time management, delegation, those are the things, we call them career accelerators. They're also productivity accelerators. This is how leaders and managers get ahead. This is how people advance their careers. This is how businesses grow, is by mastering these three things. And so I've got some great tools that I'm going to share with you today. But first I want to learn a little bit more about you guys. Who's on the call? And so we got a poll. I think CJ is going to throw that up for me. Tell me who you are. What is your current role? Who am I working with here? All you have to do is just click on the answer that applies to you. If you're an owner, technician, CSR, etc., office staff.
Sorry, just got that thrown up, Rick.
All right. Yep, I see. Fantastic. Yep, the answers are coming in.
Looks like a fair amount of owners on the call today.
Yeah, about half. That's good. Owners, general managers. No technicians. They're out in the field. They're out in the field working right now. CSRs are too busy answering the phone. But we got some office staff folks. We got some GMs, department managers, etc. So perfect. This webinar is for you. Excellent. So, all right. So I mentioned time management, delegation, communication, right? When we're in peak season, when we're the busiest, when life is the most hectic, right? That's when we need these skills. That's when we need these tools. This is going to be your key to getting through that peak season. And so time management. So we're going to start with time management. And I'll tell you, well, actually, we got another poll. Let's go straight to the poll and then I'll launch right into it. What gets in the way of good time management for you? I know we're all busy. That's a given. We always have things we say, gosh, if I just had more time, I could do this, or one day I'm going to get to that. And then we don't. Why is that? Difficulty saying no. That's a big one. Yeah, some of us just have a hard time saying no. We say yes to everything. Lack of prioritization comes up. Yep, distractions. Lots of distractions, right? Everybody wants a piece of you. So we're being pulled in a million different directions, throws us off our track. We show up in the morning, we got a plan in place. This is what I'm going to do today. And immediately you walk through the door and you get hit right in the face. I've been there. I've done it. So yeah, distractions, poor planning, lack of prioritization, and of course, difficulty saying no. Absolutely. So I'm going to introduce you to first concept here today. Some of you may have heard of this through the Pareto principle. Some of you may know it by a simpler rule, which is just the 80-20 rule. This is one of the key teachings that we use at MAP, which is, to focus on the Pareto principle, which is the concept is that 20% of the input, which is your time, resources, effort, is what's yielding 80% of the output, right? So not all tasks are equal. That's the point here, is that we're staying busy, but are we busy working on the right things? And don't get too hung up on this ratio, this 20-80. It's not an exact science. It could be 90-10. It could be 50-20. The main thing is understanding that it's this inverse relationship of effort to output. Now, you've probably already witnessed some of this in your business. I know once we were tracking performance of technicians and discovered over a 3-month period in our Phoenix operation, for example, that we had 10% of the technicians were generating 50% of the revenue. So you've probably seen something like that with your own team. If you're using Service Titan, I know they've got that heat lamp so you can kind of see where the money's coming from. And I'm sure that it's some percentage as well, probably 10-15% of the local community is responsible for a very large portion of the revenue that you're realizing, month over month, year over year. Likewise, sometimes with the time that we have set aside for supervision, who do we spend most of our time with? It's probably those troublemakers, right? It's probably that lower 10%, 20% that's sucking up, 80% of our time that we dedicate for supervision. And so, that's the Pareto principle at play. And it comes up again and again. We teach this early in our workshops because we just keep coming back to it again. And it's about, prioritizing the most important thing, what we call, the vital factors. And so, vital being the most important. So what do you do with that other 80%? That's the question we always get. Okay, so if I'm able to prioritize and figure out what the 20% are, then what happens to the other 80%? And so what we teach there is, we call it the 3Ds. And so you can either delegate, which we're going to spend some time here today talking about, delay, which is not the same thing as procrastinate, because when we delay something, think also schedule, right? So we're not going to do it today. It's still important. It's a high value item, but we're just going to reschedule it. We're going to schedule it to another day. And then on that day, it becomes part of your vital few. So we're going to delegate some of these things. We're going to delay. And then the last one, D, it stands for delete. And that is, do we have to do all the things that are on our plate? Probably not. There's probably some things that you could just get rid of completely. For some reason, we think they're important, maybe nice to have, but these are the things that are kind of high input, low output. So the opposite of what we're talking about here, right? Spending, a significant amount of time for a very small output. Maybe we just get rid of it. So it's delegate, delay, and delete. And then what's left, of course, our 20%, that's what we do, right? So those are the 4 Ds now, 4 Ds. All right. Couple of tools. We can start with, where's the time going, right? How are we spending our time now? I don't know about you guys. I have an iPhone. I get a report every week. It tells me how many hours I spend on the phone. Yes, I said hours because it's about 5 daily on the phone. Didn't believe it when I first saw it. It was kind of a mind blower. There's some great apps out there that can help you do this too, tracking your time and just seeing where the time's going. Where does it all go? Guaranteed you're going to find some things that you can delete and delay and delegate just by tracking your time and seeing where it's going. All right, this next one, this is important too. So just like all tasks are not equal, all hours in the day are also not equal. So this is what we call the energy curve. If you're like 90% of the population, you're probably more of a morning person than an evening person, meaning that you get your best work done in the early half of the day, not in the back half of the day. And so your energy level is going to kind of follow this curve right here. It's going to peak in the morning, right up until, around 2 o'clock, we start to see it decline. I'm sure you can identify, right? We get a little tired. We see a dip right there between 2 and 4 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock. And then we get this second wind, later in the early evening. But you can see that the peak is much lower. So we get a little boost there. And so what this tells us is that we want to identify those items, those vital issues, those things that are really going to move the needle, that require a lot of our energy and attention. We want to schedule those during our peak time, right? Which means we don't want to schedule things like checking email, maybe having some of those meetings. We don't want to schedule those during those peak hours. And so I have here attention, right? Paying attention to not just energy, but our attention is the same way. We lose focus, we lose attention as the day progresses. So again, focusing on those morning hours. Fatigue. Our brains are about 3% of our body weight, and yet they consume about 25% of our energy. So once again, Pareto principle at play. And what we want to do, so when we make decisions, each time we're making a decision, we're depleting that energy level, right? We're depleting that attention level. And so we want to protect that. And, we do that by eliminating distractions in the morning hours. We put a fence around those productive hours, and that's when we get our deep work done. So I mentioned Deep Work and Flow, great book by Cal Newport. It's called Deep Work. And one of the things he talks about is how, when we're really digging into a task, an important task, one thought leads to the next thought, which leads to the next thought. They stack on top of each other, and we end up in this deep state where we're in the flow, and that's when we're getting our best work done. But if you get interrupted when you're in that flow period, it's going to take an average of about 22, 23 minutes to get back where you were, right? So super important from a productivity standpoint that we protect those hours and that we eliminate those distractions. He recommends, by the way, 60 to 90-minute sessions, and then you come up for air. You need a little break. 90 minutes is where we kind of tap out. It's time to get up out of our chair, maybe move around a little bit. That's when you can, respond to some text messages or some emails, make some phone calls and so forth, and then we jump right back into it. So that's the deep work and flow. Bottom line, high quality work is a function of time spent multiplied by intensity of focus, right?
Rick, I noticed that the 2 p.m. dip correlates perfectly to the time that my 2-year-old wakes up from his nap.
Perfect. And it looks like someone has raised their hand.
I'd say to go ahead and just type your question into the chat and we'll get to it. Thank you.
All right, good stuff. So that's the energy curve, super important to pay attention to that. And then, let me back up real quick here. So I talked about track your time, pay attention to energy levels, pulse and pause cycles, right? And building your schedule out with time chunks. And so that's this graphic right here. So this is what most people do, right on the left. And we know research tells us that multitasking is a myth. It's not effective. We're actually far more effective when we focus in on one thing at a time. So monotasking is really the better approach. And so what time blocking is where we're going to take this schedule here and we're going to try to group things together with breaks in between. So you see on the right, time blocking. In this case, it's, create a proposal. This is going to require a lot of time and attention. Got to get it right? We want to make sure that we get the numbers right. We don't want to underbid. And you can see that the entire first half of the day is consumed with this project. Great. The back half of the day has got the emails, the messages, and the meetings, right? So again, paying attention to that energy curve. And if you're thinking, geez, 4 hours, that's a long time for me to focus in on one topic. Remember what I said about the pause, the pause and pause cycles, right? So 60 minutes, 90 minutes, that's about the maximum that you want to, stay on task before you want to come up for air. And so you can certainly filter in some breaks in there, and as well as, kind of refresh, reset, and then jump right back in. But that's far more effective than this broken up piece. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking like, hey, that sounds great, but if you saw my schedule, there's no way I could do that, right? I'm getting phone calls, I'm getting, there's emergencies that are happening and so forth. And that's where you're going to want to pay attention to delegation later. Just kind of giving yourself that space, creating that space to be able to focus in and lock in on what's most important, that vital few, right? That's the Pareto principle at play. Let's talk about distractions, interruptions, time wasters. Several people mentioned distractions, right? People knocking on the door, the standard like, hey, you got a minute, which we know turns into 15, 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. So what are those things that are getting in the way? What are those interruptions? What are those distractions? I mentioned protecting your productive time. A lot of guys will say like, I have an open door policy. People know that they can approach me whenever. Well, that's great. But it's also an invitation to multiple interruptions. And so, closing your door, having, established downtime. When I say downtime, this is focus time versus having the open door policy. I recommend the open door policy in the afternoon, if that's possible. If somebody wants to come in and, ask a question, whatever, sure. If it's a quick one, fine. But generally speaking, those usually end up being longer discussions. And so let's find some time this afternoon, get on my calendar, and let's sit down this afternoon and let's talk through this when you can have my full and undivided attention, right? It's not going to happen in the morning. What are those time wasters? Sometimes it is those conversations, especially if they're just social discussions. what other time wasters? Maybe, I already know because I go on social media and I see people posting all day long on LinkedIn. I see people posting all day long on, Facebook. So I know that we're taking time out of our busy schedules to post up on social media. Is that the best use of our time? Maybe it's a nice little, refrain from, the busy work. But again, we all have time in our day that we're wasting for sure. Maybe it's playing a little video game. Can we get some of that time back? Can we push that out? I mentioned controlling interruptions. And, so once again, when I get to delegation, that's going to be a good one because, maybe there's somebody else that can be the go-to. Maybe you don't have to be always the go-to. Too helpful, too available, too helpful. I don't know if you guys have had the experience. I know I have, where I've been in a meeting and, somebody tries to call me and I silence the phone, because I'm in a meeting. And then I get back to them after the meeting is over and they say, oh, don't worry about it. I already took care of it. I already figured it out. Right. I mean, it tells us right there that our people are capable of solving a lot of problems without us. It's just that sometimes we're the easiest answer. And so, encouraging our staff to, look elsewhere, try to solve problems on their own, or a lot of times the resources are available. They're just too lazy to utilize those resources. So, maybe not being so available and overly helpful. Avoid taking on others' responsibilities. This is a trap that a lot of us fall into, right? We think we're Superman and we can solve everything. And maybe you can. Maybe you can do it all. I'll tell you, you can probably do anything. You just can't do everything, right? And when people come to you with their problems, it's super important that you make sure that they leave with those problems, that they're their problems and that they own them. Not to say that you're not there to help, but the next bullet there requires solutions, not problems. That's what we're looking for, right? Remember what I said about brain power and brain activity and the energy that we're using in our brains. When people come to you with a problem, now you're in decision-making mode and you're tackling the problem. Let's transfer some of that burden back onto them, right? Bring me some solutions. I always say, bring me 2 or 3, at least one kind of quick and dirty solution that's going to get us through the battle today. And then give me one more elegant long-term solution that's going to solve this problem going forward, right? So it doesn't come up again. But at least start the process by putting some thought into it and give me some solutions that I can work on. I might throw one in myself, but it's so much easier for you to be able to choose from 3 or 4 options and help this person make the right decision, as opposed to taking the project on yourself. And then I mentioned, obviously, mastering delegation. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about delegation. That's our next function that we're going to dig into. But before we do that, one more poll. Which time management strategy do you think is going to help you the most?
While I launched that, Rick, something that I've started to do recently is block out my deep work time on my calendar. So I know, a lot of people have shared calendars with their teams, and maybe even blocking out, your downtime, your recovery time. Is that something that you would recommend?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Just get it scheduled. What we tend to do is we're reactive, right? That's what we do. We go through our day, we go through our week, and we're just responding, we're reacting to every little thing that comes up, as opposed to being proactive. And I hear that a lot when I'm meeting with clients and we talk about strategic planning. And I say, what's one of the biggest issues around here? They say, oh, we're way too reactive. We need to be more proactive. And so, CJ, what you just described is, is a very proactive activity, right? Like let's put some structure to our calendar and then let's stick to it. And let's have some processes and procedures in place so that stuff doesn't just fly at us, that we actually have a proactive response. So some great answers here. A couple people like that Pareto principle. That's going to be your friend. Require solutions, not problems. Another good one. Using a clock or a timer. Train your team. This is a good one. Train your team in effective time management skills, right? So that's important. One, you master the skill yourself, and then you teach your team how to do it as well, so that everybody's improving their productivity. And by the way, that also frees up some time for them so that you can delegate.
Rick, does MAP have kind of a turnkey solution to teach time management principles?
We go over this pretty extensively in our workshops. We have a whole module dedicated just to that. And we've got a bunch of tools that we utilize, to do that. And it's not just managing time generically. It's also like things like meetings, emails, et cetera. So yeah, the answer is yes. We have quite a bit of training around this subject because we only have so much time, right? We're We're not going to make it. You can't get it back. You can't buy it. You can't save it. You just have to use it effectively.
I'm going to drop a link to MAP's contact page just in case anybody wants some of those resources.
Sure. Yeah, and I saw that, several people also chose practice effective delegation techniques. So we're going to talk about that next. And by the way, I hear all the time people say, I always ask the question, why aren't we delegating more? And the answers I get are typically, and maybe these are some of your answers too, people say things like, well, it's just so much easier to do it myself. It takes me less time to do it than it does to train somebody else how to do it. Or I can't trust the people around me. I work with a bunch of ding dongs and I can't trust them to do this, or they just won't do it as well as I do it. And any number of things. Or I feel bad. I feel bad about giving other people my work. I hear that one a lot too. So those are some common answers I get about why people don't delegate. But let me tell you something. This is probably one of the most powerful tools that you'll be able to use. All the people that I've known over the years that are at the top of an organization or near the top of an organization, people that are highly productive, are master delegators. They get it. And they are super good at getting these things off their plate. And so I'm going to talk about some techniques to be able to utilize delegation effectively. The things that I mentioned, some of those reasons why people don't delegate, those are the objections that we have to overcome. Those are the things that we're going to have to get over. And so let's jump right into our delegation checklist here, right? And it starts with selecting the right person. Now, this is important. You say, yeah, it seems pretty obvious, right? Of course, we're going to select the right person, but who is the right person? Right off the bat, we probably think, oh, the right person is the person whose skill set matches up well with the task. And that might be true, but we also have to pay attention to their workload. And so, one of the things, what do they call it? The paradox of success, right? Is that we sometimes reward our best employees, our A players, with what? More work, right? So because they're really good and they're effective in their jobs, they get extra work. And then we keep loading them and loading them. And because they're A players, they're not going to say no. They're going to say yes. But when a person has way too many priorities, guess what? They have no priorities. And so that's why we have to be careful that we don't always go to the same person over and over again. So a couple of techniques about selecting the right person. There might be somebody else on the team that has some open capacity. And by the way, I know that, our people, that's our most expensive expense on our P&L is our payroll. It's also probably our most underutilized asset, right? So I promise you, if you look around the room, there's some capacity. Somebody's got some extra capacity that they're not utilizing that you can now start to leverage. And so maybe it's finding that person. Might involve some training. I get it. But here's another technique that you can use. If your A player, the one that you want to delegate this task to, has a full slate, maybe there's something on his or her plate that you can delegate to one of those other employees to free up some capacity for that person to take on this new task. So, selecting the right person, making sure you got a good matchup on that. And then along with that, making sure that you give the ownership to one person, right? Not two people, because when two people are responsible, no one is responsible. So we want to make sure one person does it. Doesn't mean two people can't work together on the project, but one person owns the responsibility, right? And then this next one's a big one, which is, I'm going to skip down to the number 4 there. Don't micromanage, right? So what we want to do is focus on the results, right? What is the desired result? Nobody likes to be micromanaged. And by the way, micromanaging takes a lot of your time too. So the point here is to get the work off your plate and to free up some time and capacity. So we're going to have to get out of the habit of micromanaging. Focus on the results.
You mind if I jump in real quick? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking it would be interesting to see in the chat what tasks do we think during the busy season we would love to delegate, and maybe we can get to that during the Q&A session. But if you wouldn't mind just dropping in the chat, everyone, what do you think the biggest thing that we need to delegate during the busy season is?
And do we want to hit those now, or you want to save those for the end?
No, we can save them for the end. I was just interested to see where people's minds are when we're talking about this. Like, where does your mind automatically go? What things are you automatically already thinking about delegating right now? Be interested to see.
Yeah. I'd love to see that as well. So again, focusing on the result, and then give people the time and space to do it their way. A couple of things. One, they tend to be more, people are going to be a little bit more committed to doing it when they have a say in how it gets done. So that's a key motivating factor when you're delegating. Now that doesn't mean you're just going to, forget about it, delegate it, and forget about it. So you still want to be there. You want to provide guidance. Somebody said you want to give them like some bumpers, right, to keep them on track. But at the same time, let them do it. Let them do it. Let go and let them. This is a great professional development opportunity for your people to be able to step up and take some of these new tasks off of your plate. Negotiate firm deadlines, right? So again, having them have a say in when they, when the task gets done. Obviously, sometimes we've got firm deadlines that it has to be done, but giving them some flexibility and choosing how and when they work on it and how they do it. And again, if you're focused on the results, you might even be surprised they may do it better than what you were going to do. And so again, just giving them that opportunity. Encourage feedback and questions. But we are going to follow up, right? Because we still own it. Ultimately, if you're the boss, you still own this task. And so we're not abdicating it. We're owning it still. And so we're following up regularly. I like to ask people, how would you like to keep me informed of your progress? Right? So just, again, giving them some control over this, over the task, but having them, tell you how they're going to keep you, updated on the progress. We don't want to wait. So if we have a deadline, we sure as heck don't want to wait until the day before to find out it's not going to get done, right? So having some touch points along the way to ensure success. And then lastly, good practice here. We give credit for success. We take responsibility for the failure, right? Publicly. So we want to praise the good performance, but we're going to take responsibility for the failure because ultimately, it does fall under our realm of responsibility. Okay. Which of those delegation strategies can you improve the most? What's your key opportunity here? Again,
I think so often the wrong person gets tasked with the task to complete, and it just really kind of throws the whole team for a loop. That's the number one answer so far.
Yeah, selecting the right person, of course. Yeah, who is that person? It's not always the person we think it is, right? We have that go-to person. Might be someone else. Something else to consider. We always think delegation is a downward activity, like we're delegating it to one of our direct reports. And quite frankly, a lot of times that's exactly what it is. But don't be afraid to delegate laterally to a coworker. Maybe somebody else whose skill sets line up better than yours for that task. Right. So we can delegate laterally to our coworkers. Good. Yeah, got some great answers. So selecting the right person came out on top, right? That's the biggest one is, really spending some time thinking about who is the right person for the task and what is their time capacity. That's the key second piece to that whole thing is, do they have the time to be able to dedicate to it? And it might come with, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to, right? So we might have to either delay something, which is to reschedule it for them, or maybe delegate something off of their plate onto another employee so we can create that capacity for them. But we don't want to burn them out. We don't want to just keep loading them up so that A players turn into B players because their performance goes down, or that they just burn out and they leave, right? That's not helping us. So very good. Okay. Again, this is such a powerful skill to develop. And the people that I know that have been very successful in their careers have mastered this. They are really good at getting those things off their plate. And by the way, by getting those things off of your plate, bring up some more capacity for you, right? So now you're working more on the business, a little bit less in the business. So for those owners that are on the call, right, getting rid of those things, kind of taking yourself out of the weeds so that you're now focusing on the business. All right, let's talk about communication. So communication, George Bernard Shaw, Irish playwright, once said, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I think, the problem that we run into often is we confuse talking with communicating. Talking, delivering the message, that's just half the equation. right? So we have to make sure that we're delivering a good message, but also we have to make sure that the other person heard it, right? And just because they're standing in front of you doesn't mean that they heard it. And so how do we make sure that when we're speaking, we're getting good, the person is comprehending the message, they got it. I'm going to give you a couple of tools with that as well. But it starts with you. It starts with you, the speaker, making sure that, we're very clear with what we're saying. I think, sometimes we get hung up, we say too many things. And the real intent, the real message gets lost in there. And now the listener is not quite sure exactly what the point is. And so keeping our delivery concise, to the point, as few words as possible, right? Just get the point across. The second half of that, of course, is the listening piece, right? And so, research tells us that, in a recent study, they asked people to rate themselves as listeners. 92% of the people responding said they rated themselves as good or very good listeners. But of course, what the research tells us is that only about 25% of the population are actually considered good or very good listeners. And so, huge mismatch there. We're actually not as good at this as we think. And by the way, not completely our fault, because what the research also tells us is that the average person speaks about 125 words a minute. And yet as listeners, we can comprehend 400 to 500 words a minute, right? So we can think about 4 times faster than what the person's thinking or speaking. And so what do we do with all that extra capacity, right? That extra bandwidth? I'm sure we're thinking about things that we want to say, or maybe we're thinking about completely, other things. Our mind wanders, right? We drift. We start going down these other little paths and we're not listening. And so, the real challenge here with this skill is to stay in the moment, right? To block out some of those distractions, some of those mental distractions that are happening, and really just lock in and listen to the person. And we can do this in a number of ways. I always ask people in a workshop, can you tell when someone's not listening? And they always say yes. And how can you tell? And, it's body language, and it's some of their habits. Are they looking at their watch, or are they playing with their phone, or are they, not making good eye contact, not responding? So all these things, and look, they would say the same thing about you, right? And so having the discipline to really, lock in, this is a key move, I think, for leaders. If you want to be a better communicator, be a better listener. And by the way, the thing that George Bernard Shaw was talking about, this illusion that communication is taking place, it's expensive. It's pretty expensive. You probably don't have to think too hard about, problems that you've had within your business and that were caused by poor communication. I read 2 different studies trying to come up with the cost of poor communication. And one of them said you could take your entire payroll, multiply by 18%, and that's the cost of poor communication. Those are the mistakes. Another study said take your head count, multiply by 25,000, annually, and that's the cost of poor communication. So it's very expensive. Like I said, you probably don't have to think too hard to come up with some of your own examples of things that happened in the workplace where maybe, got the scheduling wrong, delivered the wrong equipment, installed the wrong equipment, got the time wrong. Customer was expecting you at this time, you showed up at that time. I had a situation once where the crane didn't show up, they got the day wrong. All of these are communication issues, right? Both internal and external. And so, when we hit that peak season, and when, the stress levels go up and, we're super busy, that's when we have to really slow it down and make sure that we're ensuring effective communication. So one of the tools I want to share with you, we call it the communication loop. Looks like this, right? So we prepare the message. Now, we're not talking about the casual conversation that happens in the hallway or in the break room, but when we're having a formal communication, when we're delivering some important information, right? Make sure that we've got a clear, concise message, right? That we're preparing the message and we're taking into consideration the listener, right? So we're not jumbling it up with too much information. We're just keeping it simple, concise, to the point, and clear. Send the message gets received. How do we know it got received? It's the playback, right? Now, I'll tell you who uses this technique all the time, is the airline industry, right? So pilots in the control tower, when they're communicating back and forth, one side says something, the other side repeats it before they respond, right? We always repeat what we heard just to make sure. And I've listened to recordings of this, and it's amazing how many times we think we heard something and we got it wrong. And so by repeating it back, that gives the sender an opportunity to clarify that. So we can use that same technique in our office. And here's how it works, right? So you deliver a message. A lot of people don't want to deliver it in such a cold way, like, okay, so what did I just say, right? That has a condescending sound to it, or like a parent-child relationship type sound to it. And so, maybe finding a softer way to do that might be something like, hey, just to make sure that I covered all the points, can someone repeat back to me what I just said? So finding just a kinder way to say that so that it doesn't seem condescending, but at the same time, you're getting that person to repeat it back to you to clear up any kind of miscommunications. You can also use this in reverse. I've done that as well. Somebody says something to me, and I'll come back and say, hey, just to make sure that I heard you correctly, this is what I think you said. And give them the opportunity then to correct you, right? Because we want to get this right the first time around. And when you start doing this, and when this becomes part of your culture, how you communicate with one another, you don't have to say those things. People just do it, right? Okay, what I heard you say is this, right? So the point here is to try to clear up the communication, keep it simple, keep it concise, to the point, ensure that the other person has heard, so that we've conveyed meaning, so that we've closed that loop, so that actual communication has taken place. It's not just speaking. We may have to say things more than once just to keep reinforcing it, to make sure that that message is landing well. And so that's a great tool there, the communication loop. Other things to keep in mind, failure to establish. So these are some barriers to effective communication. So we talked about unidentified purpose, not being clear, poor listening, failure to establish the best median and or time, right? So two things there. Median, so when I say it's actually medium, what's the best medium? We're talking about, is it face-to-face? Is it a Zoom call? Is it a phone call? It could be text message or Slack, email, what's the best medium? It might be, it really depends on the level, the sensitivity and the level of importance, right? So we know that the best form of communication is live communication, face-to-face. Why? Because we can not only hear the inflection in the voice, we can also study body language, and we can get that input as well to make sure that we have a clear understanding. So typically sensitive discussions, we like to have those in person, right? Less sensitive conversations can happen, over email or text message. But again, keeping in mind that we lose the tone of voice, and we lose the body language when we use those other mediums. And so choosing the right one that matches up with what we're saying. Sometimes I see text messages come through and you just go back and forth, like, hey, once you've gone back and forth 2 or 3 times, like, maybe just let's have a phone call here, right? Or my favorite one is when somebody texts me and they say, how do I do such and such again? Like, I'm not going to sit here and text all that, right? Like, let's just have a phone call. So finding the right medium. Failure to get on the listener's level, that has kind of a condescending connotation to it. And it's not really what that means. It just means making sure that we're lined up, right? And so if somebody's super busy and they're distracted, right, you're not going to be able to get on their level, and vice versa. So making sure that we've got the right, we're both in the right place. If somebody's stressed out, if they're angry, right, we're not going to be able to get on their level. Ignoring emotions. So sometimes we're speaking to people, we're not paying attention to their body language, we're not paying attention to the cues that we're getting back from them. And then lastly, one of our golden rules at MAP is that we focus on the problem, not on the person, right? Focus on the problem, not the person. And, when we focus on the person, they get defensive, right? And they shut down. And so when we trigger those defenses, communication is lost. They're not listening. So when we maintain our focus on the problem, that takes the emotion out of it.
That's very good marriage advice too, everyone.
Hey, and the communication loop is also good marriage advice. I use that with my wife all the time. All right. So what is your biggest barrier to effective communication? What's getting in your way? Again, you just click on the answer, the one that most aligns with you. Yeah, defenses are triggered. Boy, that one's coming in hot. Defenses and emotion, ignoring the emotions.
Yeah, I think so often we're focused on solving the problem that we kind of just blow through, the fact that there's emotions and there's personalities and there's feelings involved with everything. especially if, maybe that wrong person got delegated the task and now they're feeling a little bit defensive because they didn't do it correctly. It's a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so the early quick responses were about the defenses being triggered. That's huge. That's huge. And yeah, absolutely. Everybody's going to shut down. So, we want to make sure we remember, attack the problem, not the person, right? In those situations. We're just trying to solve problems here, guys. We're not trying to point fingers. We're not trying to call, this person's an idiot. We just want to get to a solution and move forward, right? Win the day. I had a coworker once that, boy, when things went wrong, he just lost it, just completely lost it. And, it took 20 minutes to calm down so that we can start getting to the solution stage. And so, those emotions can sometimes run high, but that's not effective. That's not going to get us to the finish line. So, all right. Great answers. Thank you guys, by the way, for participating in the polling. That's really good feedback for me. I like to see that. All right. So we're going to move to close. And by the way, I appreciate you guys taking out your time. And this is what I'll tell you. I said in the beginning, right? These three things, we call them career accelerators. They're also performance accelerators, right? The best leaders, the most successful people that I've met, outstanding communicators, right? Understand how to manage their time, and they are master delegators, right? That is the skill right there that, we just can't, when you master that, that's when you start to, it actually goes hand in hand with time management, because as you're delegating those responsibilities off of your plate, you're freeing up some time capacity for you to focus on your vital few. And the vital few are the things that are really going to move the business forward. That's the thing that's going to move the needle, right? That's going to actually have an impact. And so all of these things really work in conjunct. And as you practice these things, they're all skills, right? All of these are skills. We can all get better at communication. We can all get better at managing our time. We can all get better at delegating. And as you get better and better at those things, one of the slides, one of the points, the bullets here said to, teach others within the organization on how to also be better communicators, how to also be better time managers, and how to also be better delegators. So all of those. So when this starts to reverberate throughout the organization, that's when you're going to see massive growth, accelerated growth. So, okay. So CJ mentioned, if you click on that QR code, upper right-hand corner, right below map, it'll take you to a questionnaire, which is going to generate your Monday morning action plan. So a lot of times, today's Thursday, we're getting up, close to the end of the week. And a lot of times when we attend a conference or a webinar or something like that, we get super excited about it. And then what we fail to do is we fail to take action. And that's really where it's at. So MAP stands for Management Action Programs. Action is our middle name. That's where we get results, is by taking action on these things. And so on your Monday morning action plan, when you fill out the information, you're going to get this emailed back to you. And it's going to have a summary of the barriers to effective communication, along with a reminder of the communication loop. You're going to see the steps to successful delegation. I'm asking you to choose two things on your schedule right now that you're going to delegate. And I mean, like, find out who the owner is going to be. When are you going to do it? When's the task going to get done, right? But we're going to get into the habit moving forward of being good delegators. And then lastly is the time management strategies. So I've got a summary of the key strategies for time management, and then some space there for you to identify some time wasters that you're going to commit to reducing. You may not eliminate them completely, but you're going to reduce them, right? So again, to be, practicing good time management skills. So, when you get into the habit of doing these things, communication, delegation, time, now's the time to work on those things, because we want these in place by summertime, right? When we hit peak season, we want all of this stuff to be in full force, so that we're not going nuts, by the end of June. So, okay, great. So CJ mentioned, put any kind of questions in the chat.
Yeah, let's jump into the Q&A real quick.
Sure.
And again, there's a QR code right below me to scan to get that action plan again, if you haven't had the chance to. And one more time, Breezy is out here really trying to help contracting business owners, HVAC business owners, really utilize a CRM system that works, that's not overpriced, that has great support. So if you're interested in perhaps winning a billboard in your local market, go ahead and scan that QR code. and schedule a demo with us, I'll drop the link in the chat as well. So let's get into that Q&A session. I wrote down a couple questions, so I'll get it started. But if you guys want to drop your questions in the chat, that'd be awesome. I'll get to them. Rick, what are some key delegation strategies that we can implement to get some stuff off our plate? One of our past guests, Brigham Dickinson, shared his Post-it note strategy, where you write down every single task that you have on an individual Post-it note, stick it up on the wall, and you're allowed to pick 3 of those to do yourself, and then you have to delegate everything else. So I'm wondering what your recommendations are.
Yeah, so there's a couple of really interesting tools there. One of them, you may have seen the Eisenhower matrix, which is kind of, you've got on the one side important, not important, and on the other axis you've got urgent and not urgent. And so some people will use that, right? And so you're going to do the things that are important and urgent. You're going to schedule or delay the things that are important but not urgent, and then you're going to delegate those things that are urgent, but maybe not important to you right now, like maybe not your most vital few thing. And then we're going to delete, the items that are, not urgent and not important. We just get rid of those things. So that's certainly one technique. Another technique very similar has to do with, the value or impact on the one axis versus the time required, right? So if there's not a lot of time required and it's a big impact item, that's in our do list, right? That's going to be, that's exercising the Pareto principle. If it's low impact, high energy, high, effort, we want to delete those things. And so it's the same concept, just structured a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, it's really just zeroing in on what are the most impactful things. So when you look back on your day, one way to do this is to look backward and say, all right, what did I get done today, right? What were the key things that I did today that had the biggest impact? And then everything else is probably somewhere in that delay, delegate, or delete, right? What are the things that made the biggest difference? And then what are those things that are going to make the biggest difference tomorrow, right? Because that's what I want to make sure I do, those big things.
You were sharing with me Ken Goodrich's recommendation.
Oh, yeah.
You want to tell that story real quick?
Yeah, sure. So I was present while Ken Goodrich was having a conversation with a young business owner. And he said, listen, I want you to get really good at delegation. That's going to be your key move, is being able to delegate. And he said, I want you to delegate 80% of what you're doing right now to your staff. Figure it out, right? 80%. And then with what's left, I want you to delegate 80% of that. And ultimately, what I want you to do is delegate everything. I want you to keep delegating until you don't have anything left to do. And then that's when I know you're a real business owner, right? Because now you're working on the business, not in the business. Really good advice.
That's incredible. I think we could all benefit from doing that. Beyond the Monday morning action plan, how do you recommend that leaders reinforce accountability and alignment throughout the week, especially during the really busy season, the peak season, demand service calls coming in? What are some things that business owners can do to realign their people?
Sure. I think a couple of things. One, I mentioned this a little bit earlier with delegation, as far as like negotiating deadlines and things like that, letting employees do it their own way. So focus on the results. So I think getting their buy-in, getting their commitment, any way that you can do that. And it's usually by them having some input into it. And so, what are your standards? What are your standards that you're enforcing? And, is your team bought into it? Do they agree with those standards? So I always ask, I used to ask technicians all the time, like, hey, what are you proud about working here? What makes you proud about your work? Getting them to kind of feed that back to me, so like when we talk about doing a great job for a customer, what does that mean? So have them have a hand in determining what those standards are. And then what we do, and the owner of MAP says this so eloquently, he said, we take the emotion out of it and we just make the standard the villain. Right. And so it's not about me holding you accountable. It's about, we have agreed upon standards. And so the standard is the villain. You either hit the number or you didn't hit the number, right? You either completed the task or you didn't complete the task. This is not me coming down on you. It's you not meeting the standard that you set for yourself. And so, that's a powerful one. I think, too often we have these top-down demands upon our people. And I think is the more we can include them and involve them helps us with, that accountability.
For sure. In the chat, Randy asked, well, not so much a question, but an interesting thing to talk about during the busy season, being selective with the vendors you work with that don't become a time suck during the busy season. What's your kind of feedback or takeaway on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I like the thing about being selective, right? Because that's a reference back to the Pareto principle, right? Like, what's our vital few? It's one thing. These vendors, they all have salespeople. They love to come into the office. They want your time. They want to talk to you about, how many products you're ordering, or maybe, hey, you haven't been selling a lot of, IAQ products, and so, let's talk about that. Or here's something new that we're bringing up. Or hey, do you want to go to lunch? And we fall into these traps where because we build relationships with them. That's what they're trying to do with us, build relationships. But they suck up a lot of our time, and we don't have that time in the summer, right? Like, hey, take me to lunch in October. We can talk about this in October. Right now it's go time, and my time's valuable, and I need to spend it wisely here.
For sure. Yeah, we're getting close to the hour. I'm going to ask one more question. What are some real world examples you've seen, maybe, during your time at Gettle, where poor communication led to a major setback, and how the leadership team could have prevented that from happening?
Mhm. I don't know that I can think of, I mean, I'm sure if I think about this long and hard enough, I'll come up with something that's like really big, but I'll tell you, it's not really the big things that stand out to me. It's the little things, right? I mean, think of this as like death by 1,000 cuts. It's the little miscommunications, the little setbacks, but you stack them up, right? So the more people you have, the more interactions you're having, right? You have all these opportunities for poor communication. And when I mentioned earlier, 18% of payroll, or headcount times 25,000, where does that come from? Not usually one major event, but most likely from 1,000 little ones, where we lost a little bit here, we lost a few hours there because of some kind of delay, or we had an angry customer, we lost a sale because of some kind of miscommunication. And so it just happens all around us in small ways, and that's why it slides right by. That's why we have permitted it, because we think, oh, this one little thing, not a big deal, right? Well, add them all up, it's a big deal.
Yeah, that's incredible feedback. Rick, this was a great 3 points to overcoming those busy season challenges, to stay aligned, to stay focused. Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with today?
No, just, I said it a little earlier, really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your busy schedules. MAP is an incredible resource. And so, if you want to learn more about this, or you want to, some information about maybe attending one of our workshops, we can do that ahead of the summer, give you some good management leadership skills, get you prepared, get you ready for the summer. Please reach out. I know that CJ is going to share with you a QR code where you can get in touch with us. I'm offering up a free, 30-minute consultation with anybody that wants to just talk about their business and wants to figure out if MAP's a good fit, can help you accelerate your results.
Cool. You got time for one more question? One just came in the chat.
Sure.
What advice can you give a small business that does not have the staff yet to delegate, but is looking to grow? What procedures can be put in place? And that question was from Lori.
Lori, it's hard to delegate when there's nobody to delegate to. I get it. And so your key move is really going to be applying that Pareto principle and just making sure that you're focusing on the most important, the most vital actions that are going to deliver the big results. I know when you're small, sometimes you feel like a one-man band, you have to, or one-woman band, you have to do it all. But I think, really trying to figure out, what those vital few are. And then as you grow, we want to drive, I was telling CJ this earlier, you want to drive each task down to the lowest cost, right? And so as you grow, start getting rid of some of those things, those low return items that still have to get done, but man, it'd be nice if you didn't have to do it, right? And so can you hire somebody, either at, entry-level wages, mid-level wages, whatever, that can start taking some of that off your plate, then that's how you're going to get ahead. But for now, you may have to exercise delay and delete instead of delegate, right? So that you can focus your time and attention on those most important tasks.
Yeah, Tammy says college kids are great to hire.
Yeah, sure. Especially in the summer, right? They're off. They're all in the summer. Go get them. Bring them on board.
And then maybe you can train them up and they can be employees for the rest of the year.
Hey, that's right. Look, HVAC is a great industry, right? That's a good opportunity for a career.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rick. I will make sure to get the recording and all of those resources out to the audience members.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Good luck this summer.
Cool. Thank you. And I just want to leave everybody with one more final thought. A lot of what we talked about today, and from repeatable tasks to invoicing to reaching your customers during the busy season, during the slow season, Breezy can automate a lot of these things for you. So if you would like to understand how Breezy could help you scale your business, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And again, we're giving away a free billboard to anybody that schedules a demo with us to kind of just learn how we can help. So go ahead and click that link. I'm going to leave you with a nice little image if you want to scan this QR code. But we're looking forward to seeing you again on the next show. Thank you for attending, and we'll see you soon.